Alright, draft physics video. Unfortunately, this part of the video was destroyed accidentally. So there's a part 2 that I guess I'll post after this video, so I'm just, I'm redoing the part 1, which probably isn't going to work. So just going through some of Daftloaday's points. And, again, he just so overstates he doesn't answer anything here in terms of providing some kind of definitive explanation of what this catastrophic failure of my theory is, besides reopening the tedious subject of what happens to photons when stuff is moving half the speed of light. And he somehow thinks he has some decisive evidence, and there's no evidence. There's just his opinion about what happens, and his statement that if you don't agree with his opinion about what happens, somehow you violated conservation laws. So anyway, I'll go into that somewhat. I really want to try to focus on talking about physics instead of the nonsense this idiot wants to talk about. Because this really isn't physics. He wants to talk about mathematics and in some sort of way in which he thinks the equations aren't contrived. I showed in the last videos, I think pretty decisively, that they created a sub-equation, a little formula, v1 times v2 divided by the speed of light squared. That little piece of formula was engineered for one purpose, and that is to keep the number 1 always more than 1. 1 plus something. And to have it increase as v1 and v2 increases, to have that number increase by more. And that's all it does. Obviously multiplying something is likely to get you an increase more than adding something. But anyway, it's obviously just a contrivance. It's just a way of stopping something from happening. It has nothing to do with reality. It just has to do with creating a formula to create a result that's similar to the one you want, that you claim reality is. There's no correlation by facts. There's just correlation by assumption. Anyway, so we'll play some of this, and it's just too tedious. An hour-long video where I have to accept his premises, and that's the whole point of me having a different theory, is I don't accept your premises.
There's one or two other things. Oh yeah, the other main prediction you've made, which counts as a measurable, a measurable thing about your theory, not just calling theirs wrong, is that solidity and matter cannot exist at speeds comparable to the speed of light.
The point is whatever you call it, solidity of matter. The point is that matter is moving in 3 dimensions. I've been over this so many times. Matter has 3 dimensions. That's why you can reflect light off of me. Is because I'm actually have energy going the opposite way to reflect it. Can't reflect if I don't have something for it to bounce off of. And if you move everything in one direction, it's like this pen. I could tell you that the only part that can hit something is the end. And that's like a photon. It has no materiality sideways in either of these 2 dimensions. It can't exist. It can only exist in the dimension it's going in. That's where its mass is. It's mass of 1. It has nothing in these other dimensions. And the argument is that matter has these 3 dimensions. It has mass in all the dimensions, which means there's stuff inside of it going those ways. And as you convert that all to the speed of light, that is, as you go faster and faster, a larger and larger percentage of the matter has to be pointed this way, not pointed this way, not pointed this way, not pointed this way, not pointed this way. It has to be pointed the way that you're going. And as you approach the speed of light, you have almost nothing going any other way. And it's completely some curve, Einstein's curve, a gravity well curve, R² curve, not necessarily, but there's a proportional relationship between how material you are and how fast you're moving. Now that isn't that complicated.
Now, the trouble is, it's a very iffy and woozy, wibble wobble kind of thing.
No, there's nothing iffy. There's nothing woozy, wibble wobbly about it. I've analogized it to 3 dimensions of movement. I can analogize it to a school of fish, and I've done that and pointed out that when the fish are standing still, it's because there's fish going in all directions. And if you imagine the fish were all going the same speed, you could visualize that in your head, that the only way it could stay in one place as a blob is that more fish can't be going one way than are going the other way. There has to be the same number of fish going that way as there are going that way, or the school moves. Now that's not that hard to understand, is it? Nothing wibble wobbly.
Because you've no quantitative reason for that.
No, I've completely quantitatively. I'm completely saying it's exactly proportional. More fish going this way, they're exchanged for fish going one of these other wrong ways. So here's the dimension the thing is moving, the matter. If I put a new thing going this way in, I add a new one going this way, I release one going this way or that way or that way or that way. Or the opposite direction, of course. That's how it works. It's an exchange.
Prediction. Yeah? You've not developed any formula which says where it will start to take effect, is it?
Because I don't have a formula for where it takes effect. And you want me to create one out of nothing. So like physics now, you want me to create dark energy or dark matter or some synthetic Huygens thing, some fake approximation or guess, and call it fact. I don't have that information. I don't know what bounds these little bits together inside of an electron exactly, and I don't know, maybe it takes energy to break them apart. So maybe it takes something aggressive, a little extra, to break them apart. Who knows? I don't know. We don't have experiments to demonstrate the truth, so I'm just saying, why should I make up something like you people do?
Half the speed of light, quarter the speed of light, 75% of light. You've not discussed the principle.
Right, and you have no theory that does any of that either. The thing you're defending creates synthetic things like virtual photons, dark matter, Huygens, Heisenberg, fake principles, fake rules, fake laws, never proven with a single fact or a single piece of evidence to exist. You have tons of particles, you call them, that you have no evidence they really exist. They're just made up explanations for an effect. You say, well, here's an effect, let's come up with a cause. And you're calling it good science. You make guesses. And that's all they are, guesses.
And phenomena and calculations which allow you to concretely say.
So again, calculations made out of synthetic formulas. You create a synthetic straw man formula where you create a fake velocity that doesn't exist in the universe. You contrive a little mechanism to force the equation to always prevent the answer from being a number greater than the speed of light by complete contrivance, and you call that good science. I call that rubbish. Garbage.
Within your theory, look, it starts to disintegrate at that speed. So I don't need to worry about predicting whether a beam of light at 75% speed of light, because there is no spaceships at 75% speed of light.
Yes, and so I've done the best I can. I've pointed out that I don't see any way matter survives its structure going at those outrageous speeds. That once you put matter in that condition, the matter itself will degrade, get hot, so to speak, and fall apart.
That's right.
The gravity waves are not produced the way they say they're produced. Again, you can't show me a single YouTube video doing the math correctly.
Oh, right. Well, that doesn't count, yeah? No.
That's the 2-slit experiment. And so again, just more rationalizations for why, well, I'll let them say it. I mean, if I was to do what they're doing, which is each physicist just gets to make it up, so to speak, different rules for different people. If I said opposite things in my theory, then I'd be a joke. Then you'd sit there and rip me a new asshole all over the place. How can I contradict myself? Your physics does that all the time.
You're the one making accusations of egregious lying, yeah?
No, that's again, you're a liar. Okay, where I make lies about egregious lying? Where did I do that? What I said is they are so convinced that God is God that they don't even bother reading the Bible. That they can't even pay attention to enough details to be able to say the single slit doesn't just make a bulge. They don't bother accounting for Newton. They're so obsessed with the Young experiment is where we learned so much. And they completely ignore the single slit diffraction that came first, that is even harder to explain. So the phenomenon that's more bizarre, they totally ignored, because that has something to do with Newton and it's just somehow ignorable. And then Young comes along and does this double slit thing, and all of a sudden they think diffraction just showed up then. Oh, we didn't know it existed until the double slit showed up. That's the history, and it's laughable. I didn't say they're lying. I say they're ignorant. They're ignorant.
Of egregious over-egging of the evidence, yeah?
Right, so he won't admit that the evidence has been way over-exaggerated in terms of its strength. The Eddington experiment is a perfect example. Didn't deserve a New York Times headline. The evidence wasn't decisive, complete, solid. None of that happened. And every bit of crap that's been piled on since has been just as weak and just as shabby, and he won't concede the point that this isn't evidence enough to be arrogant, obnoxious assholes and sit there and say, we have the truth. You don't. You don't have evidence to justify your confidence.
You're not going to source materials. I'm sorry.
No, I do go to the source material. So again, another lie by him. I'm talking about the source materials are what? Physics lectures in college? That's not a source material? I mean, fuck you in this, again, double standards everywhere. Fucking insane double standards.
The answers that you want and the things that you might want to criticize don't exist on YouTube.
I'm saying that's a glaring bit of evidence that this physics has not been rigorously defined or described or even exercised or used. That it's so never used that they don't even realize how it doesn't work.
Not one. They bring light waves to water waves, and how in the single slit experiment there's no match. In the double slit experiment there's not much of a match.
Yeah, because they're all analogies.
Okay, so now he's saying it's an analogy when they extract the same wave formula from the mechanical water waves and attempt to apply it to light to prove it's a wave. And yet there is no comparison between these wave phenomenons in that they're obviously being constructed by completely different mechanisms, because in the single slit water waves will not Huygens and create a diffraction pattern. Water waves will not create the Newton's ring in the single slit. It's just a canard. It's wrong.
To give you an insight into what we're talking about.
An insight into what we're talking about. What I'm talking about is that it's a distortion of the truth at minimum, and for a purpose which is not to acknowledge your evidence is weak. You keep wanting to make the evidence so much stronger than it actually is. The evidence is pitifully weak. Okay, the wave evidence, the nail in the coffin experimental, that's what they keep calling it, the nail in the coffin. You do it in this video. You have some sort of nails you're putting in some sort of coffin. You haven't come anywhere close to doing that.
The true wave-like nature is kind of encompassed really in the mathematical description.
So again, he's reaching for the mathematical description, which is the very thing I pointed out doesn't match the results. So again, what's the point? It's obviously not a wave then by that definition, because the math isn't perfect, it isn't explicit, and it isn't correct. It doesn't describe the phenomenon properly.
Descriptions.
Match. In the multi-slit experiment, there's no match again. Engage. You haven't demonstrated with a fact, you haven't demonstrated with an rhetoric out of your mouth that you're not demonstrating with an actual argument. Show me where it breaks. I'm pleading with you to rationally cognize
Okay, and so now his answer to that's going to be going back to relativity questions, general relativity questions that he says isn't even an accurate theory. The first 5 minutes of this video, he basically says, "Oh no, you misunderstood. I just meant special relativity is great, general relativity is dead." I mean, what can you say?
Okay, that's a lie. We dealt with this subject. There's no fucking breaking of anything called conservation law. Not a single conservation law is broken. It's just a fucking lie. I mean, prove it. Demonstrate. Show me the experiment.
I will.
You won't show me an experiment. No, you won't. You'll have absolutely no evidence for your notions of what happens to photons when the thing emitting them is moving half the speed of light. You have no evidence for any theoretical notions you claim to be the truth. And this is the arrogance of you. I ask for evidence and you give me your speculation about what happens in circumstances we have absolutely no tangible connection to. We have no way of seeing. You might as well just be saying, my special leprechauns, and I'm supposed to accept their existence. Fuck you. You proved my conservation failure because your special leprechaun says so. That's all you have is evidence.
Where does my theory break conservation of momentum? Where? You lying piece of shit.
Well, but he's not. He's missed. I've been clear and said, look, this is what momentum is and means, right? It's a number. It's actually a vector quantity.
So he wants to keep using his rhetoric and force me to apply my particle theory to his field universe. I don't believe in your fields existing. I don't believe any of that shit. I have no obligation until you show evidence of their existence that I have to accept their existence. So from my perspective, momentum is a real thing that a something carries. And the something goes into something else and it has to be accounted for. And so I'll use gravity as an example. When spaceships go into gravity, where they can go in one way and leave another way, and what's extracted in the process, and how a particle theory completely accounts for that. And I'll also explain to you how you don't seem to understand that light is actually a force, that it takes energy to create it, that it is itself energy, and that if you did shoot it out of a spaceship, enough of it, the same amount that would be comparable to the amount of energy in, say, a rocket exhaust, it would have exactly the same effect as a rocket exhaust. See, Daftloday thinks because light is special to us, in the sense that we can see it, he doesn't understand that it's a tiny fraction of real energy. That if I forced you to move the planet Earth towards the sun with a force that was lit up, that was light, the light would be so intense and so bright, it would be beyond your imagination, the amount of light it would take to move the Earth towards the sun. So light fools us because of our senses and because of the fact of the property that putting these little tons at a frequency is specifically, electrons are specifically sensitive to that frequency. And that's it. So he thinks that because electrons are specifically sensitive, that means it's a stronger force. When no, it's an incredibly weak representation of the force in the universe. And if you converted any other form of energy into light, and a light equivalent, think about how much light it would take to move two magnets together. Now obviously when we see two magnets move together, the same amount of force is active, but we don't see any of it. But just imagine how much light energy it would take to push two magnets into each other. And then you'll realize how much real force there is in the universe. But he doesn't understand that. So he thinks when he's shooting a laser beam out the window, he thinks that's like that somehow the whole rocket should slow down in some perceivable way. Well, you have to shoot a comparable amount of energy, and the comparable amount of energy would be you'd have to have a laser beam of hundreds of gigahertz of hundreds of gigawatts of energy before you would start realizing the fact that it has just the same effect as if it was a rocket exhaust. It's no different. It's just that you can see light and you can't see the other forces. If you could see magnetism in terms of the equal amount of visual impact for the force impact, you would be stunned. Just moving my fingers. Can you imagine how much light it would take to move my fingers like this? Just this activity would be brighter than looking at the sun on a sunny day. That's how much real energy is here. But he's too stupid to understand that.
I might have not said that in this one, but I have previously. Yeah? It's a vector quantity in a direction, and it breaks it clearly, very clearly, as I'll show. Yeah?
Okay, so he says it breaks it very clearly, as I'll show, and the rest of his video, as far as I can tell, is about experiments at half the speed of light. They have nothing to do with any real-world experiment, no real-world experiment that demonstrates any violations whatsoever. And again, the only reason why his at the speed of light or near the speed of light experiments are even an argument is because he doesn't understand that photons are a tiny percentage of the energy in the universe, visible photons, infinitesimally small percentage of the energy active in the universe right now. As I pointed out, the gravity waves they received by the LIGO thing, if it was a comparable amount of energy in the form of light, it would have burned us to a crisp.
What Mendham thinks is that if none of his little quantums disappears, then it must be conservative. Well, the number of quantums is a conserved quantity in Mendham's theory, but that doesn't make momentum as a modern physics concept.
So again, as a modern physics concept. See, he wants me to think of momentum the way he thinks of it, and I'm just going to think of it as obviously the direction has to be conserved. So, all right, so I might as well get to it since he's gotten to it. So let's just do with the simple kind of experiments that are routinely done, and this is kind of settled physics. So there's this idea that you can, shoot off of a planet. You can go around, say, a moon or something, and you can turn your direction for free. That is, you don't have to expend any more energy to do a U-turn. All right, it's all free. And the point is that yes, if you go in this way and you leave going back this way, nothing will change. All right, you won't. I have to be careful. No, if you go around one more time, all right. So let's say I go in and I take a complete rotation, and then I leave exactly the same direction I went in. Then nothing will change. Okay, the only thing you'll do is you'll take a little bit longer time to go from here to here, which we'll get back to because he's, in the next video he's doing this stupid 60 symbols video. Here it is. Why light is slower than glass. Daft answers versus QM. I remember that 60 symbols video, if it's the same one, and there was 2 different explanations provided in the video, so I'm sure he's going to quote mine that fucking video. But the argument is the reason why light slows down has nothing to do with QM. It just has to do with this simple fact that the photons interact with the electrons, and that consumes time. It does one of these things. That consumes distance. All this distance is a 0. So when you go orbit around the moon, and if you don't go any closer to the moon, that is, you never change how far away you are from the moon, and then you just add a little tiny bit of thrust here to leave, and you leave in exactly the same direction you came in, nothing will change. The moon's rotate, the moon's orbit will be the same, everything will be the same. Now, if you go around and you leave this way, you'll consume some moon energy, all right, in the sense that you'll have the opposite reaction, which is, all right, so I have to make sure I'm getting this right. So you went in this way, you tug the moon that way, and then you come back this way. I just have to remember which way you end up moving the moon. But I think the end result is the moon ends up going this way. So you push the moon out by doing that a little tiny bit. You'll steal energy from the moon. And if you move your orbit in or out, that is, if you go around in some weird shape, the same thing will happen. That has to also be accounted for as a torque against the movement of the moon. So you'll move the moon in some direction that will, in the end, equal. It all has to equal, frankly, exchanges. There has to be an exchange. So you have to take this arrow and make it go this way. You have to exchange it in here somewhere for an arrow that went this way, and it will go that way. So whatever you're taking, which is this direction, all right, you have to give this. And that's clearly in my theory, stated over and over again. All right, when I made these little bent arrows, in the other drawing, it's pointed out that this is an exchange. There's an arrow going this way inside here. So this black arrow goes red, and the red arrow goes black out. So black goes this way, red, oops, clean that up a little. So there's just an exchange in direction. The black arrow exchanges direction with the red arrow, and it's a perfectly satisfactory solution. No messing up of any momentum. So let's go to his example of this idiotic spaceship shit again, and this idea that there's a laser. And his argument is that you have to calculate the motion of the spaceship and the motion of the laser is all in, say, this direction. And that somehow by emitting light this way, I'm violating conservation of momentum in some way, when my argument would be is if you keep doing that, like say you have a little battery here or something, where are you getting the energy to pump into here? And how much energy are you pumping out? So the argument is, unless it's if it's a regular laser beam, this is 1/trillionth squared of the energy of the laser itself. The light coming out of the laser is a trillionth squared of the total mass of the laser, let alone the mass of the spaceship. So obviously just shooting a little regular laser out the side of the spaceship would have no effect on the momentum of the spaceship. But obviously if you start going gigawatts here, real energy, then you're going to have the equal but opposite reaction, and you're going to change this mass momentum. No doubt about it. He thinks perhaps not. I don't know. But it's just stupid to just sit there and say he has decisive evidence proving me wrong, and his decisive evidence is theoretical experiments in conditions we can't construct, is insipid. So I'll play a little more of this, see if there's anything else. And you'll have to deal with part 2, and I'll just play these other asshole videos.
A calculable, a measurable thing doesn't map. So because no quantums disappear, it doesn't guarantee that it doesn't break conservation's momentum.
Well, again, it does guarantee by the mechanism that you claim I haven't provided. I've provided the mechanism. This is the way it has to do it. It can't create light, it can't create gravity, it can't create magnetism by any other mechanism than this mechanism. So there has to be an exchange, by my theory. There has to be. Without an exchange, there's no change in direction. So by the theory itself, it's conservative because the mechanism is conservative. Now your obligation is to show how that mechanism can't create a laser beam. And you haven't come close to doing that. Asshole.
And as I've explained previously, the conservation laws come from pure mathematical reason based on...
Okay, so again, he says it comes from pure mathematical reason. So the idea that if I have a cup of water and I pour half the water into another cup, that the two volumes of water have to equal what I had in the cup originally is mathematical. That it's not something physically overt. that the demonstration of conservation laws, like I can't just pull a rabbit out of the hat. There's no such thing as just pull a rabbit out of the hat. Someone has to put a rabbit in the hat, or in the table below the hat. But regardless, the rabbit has to be put there before I can pull it out. He thinks I have to use something called math to understand that. I don't have to use anything called math.
On such very plausible premises, almost self-evident, especially.
Oh, again, so he's saying there's something self-evident about experiments never viewed as happening in the real world. There's something self-evident about what happens to matter when you move it 3/4 the speed of light. Bullshit. Again, I was asking for the self-evident experiment. I was asking for the experiment I can do to demonstrate how my theory fails. And instead of providing me an experiment that can actually be done on planet Earth, he provides a synthetic, fake notion in his head about what happens at the speed of light, at half the speed of light. Nothing tangible, nothing real.
In the locality, yeah? Maybe you could doubt them in the extreme distances of the universe. But principally, momentum.
Yes, that's another thing where he keeps arguing as if he knows explicitly that the universe 5 billion years ago didn't have a different pressure in it, so to speak. That everything would have been redshifted merely because gravity was a little bit of a different number 5 billion years ago. That would explain why everything's redshifted. Simple explanations like that, no, it's not even possible. They won't even consider it.
Comes from one simple idea that the physics here is the same as the physics over here. Yeah? That is a symmetry, translational symmetry, that if I move the whole universe and redo the experiment, it still gives the same answer.
Yeah, and there's nothing in my theory where that's not true. So again, that's just another straw man argument. There's absolutely nothing in my theory that prohibits you taking the whole universe, sliding it over here, and then say, go. Absolutely nothing.
Formula will work here or over here. Yeah? Whether I translate this or whether I translate the universe. Everything's okie-dokie. Any neither, neither.
Right, and there's no evidence that I violated that. So again, just this fake, false argument that this is decisive evidence, and he provides absolutely nothing as an evidence of my violation of anything.
Right, whatever her name is. She proved this as a mathematical theorem.
So again, another person proving something with their mathematical theorems. And that I would call... you want to go to what part of this is just total ignorance and then what part gets to being a lie? Well, that part starts to get to a lie, okay? These synthetic mathematical proofs of, what's the odds of, my finger wiggling this way instead of this way or something. You're not going to prove that with your stupid goddamn contrived mathematics.
And yielded conservation of momentum. I'll attach videos as usual. In Mendham's video, he rants on, it's nothing to do with geometry, it's contrived. I'll remind him with 2 key videos about why we can't travel the speed of light and a re-explanation.
Yeah, no, I'm not watching them, so I don't give a shit. And they're not in the description here, so... no, we already argued this, 12, 15 videos worth of arguments on this stupid relativity shit. If you want to believe it, go ahead and believe it. I have no help for you. It's silly.
About the geometrical principles that yield.
There's no geometric principle that obligates photons to not go where you aim them. That's just nonsense. Photons don't carry momentum like baseballs. They're not baseballs. They can't combine 2 velocities. All of that is rubbish. You want to believe it? Go ahead and believe it. I don't give a shit. I'm done with it.
From the propositions of the axioms of general relativity. It didn't work.
Again, so he said the words, general relativity. He spends the whole beginning of this video saying general relativity is the one that's crap. Now he just brought it up again. I mean, his duplicity just doesn't have any boundaries whatsoever. So he says, I was wrong because he was talking about special relativity. Now, didn't he just say the word general relativity? So he thought, he sits here and says in here, no, special relativity is great, special relativity is fine, general relativity is no good. Now he just said general relativity, didn't he? And then he blames me in the video for not listening. I just heard you say general relativity, asshole. Why are you defending a dead theory?
They didn't make a formula, they didn't contrive a formula to fit. Yeah, that's very hard.
Yeah, says you. So again, I just pointed out how the other formula was completely contrived, right? I mean, I really did. I did show you, right? They just put the same variables, multiplied them, and divided them by the square of the thing they want to prevent happening. So it's impossible for those numbers to ever get anywhere near the speed of light because they're going to be divided by the speed of light squared. It's not possible. They'll always turn into 1. It's always going to be heading towards 1. And obviously 1 plus 1 is 2, which means 1/2 of the original formula. So it's basically cutting everything in half once you get up to speed. The average is going to be 1/2, and that ends up being your curved line. Right? You can sort of get that, right? If this is 1 and this is 0, half would be the average.
You'd have to guess, and there'd be lots of people guessing wrong and in the notebooks, and you'd be able to prove that quite easily if they guessed it. Yeah? You can see the development of the mathematics yielding the formulas from the principles.
Yeah, well, whatever. There's absolutely no proof, again, in this bullshit. Definitively wrong. I mean, he has no right to use this rhetoric. He doesn't produce what he keeps promising. I don't know why you assholes reward that. I mean, why are you assholes so stupid that you reward somebody who doesn't provide what he promises ever?
The other way around, right? And you don't even understand the formula in front of you. Right, let's get cracking.
No, you're the one clearly who doesn't understand the formula in front of you. And now he's going to post the stupid contrived formula right here on the video. Watch this. Watch it.
Right.
There it is. The same crap. V1 plus V2. He doesn't even have the equal sign now, right? Because it equals V, right? A non-existent thing that never travels at real speed. But look, V1 plus V2. Now this is the part that was added. Okay, 1 plus, which means it'll always be a number bigger than 1. And it's V1 times V2 divided by C squared. So you can understand if this number was half the speed of light and this number was half the speed of light, that would equal C squared. You can see that, can't you? Shit. Alright. And so this is, again, he's just doing, I'll show some of it. It's so poorly done that there's just no point. We could jump ahead and see if there's anything at all here, but I doubt there will be.
This leaves, and it was projected from here. The whole better of being towards the back of the spaceship because it's going to bend away. Yeah. Okay,
so again, it won't bend. So this is, again, you're so fucking got your ass, your head in your ass, your relativity ass, that you can't even get it right. No, the photon travels through space exactly straight. The side of the ship moves. This never bends anywhere. Alright, that's just bullshit. It doesn't bend anywhere whatsoever. And if you were standing right here, you would actually go right into the pathway of the photons and they could never get anywhere anyway because you're going to move right into them. So they're not going to bend. You're going to move right into them. You won't see them bend. That's not going to happen.
And it carries away a perpendicular, a unit of momentum, presumably, or some other value, but 0 in the direction of travel of the spaceship. So then what we can do is examine whether momentum's conserved.
Right, so he thinks he can measure the amount of energy produced by a laser beam subtracted from the entire mass of the spaceship, and that would be detectable. I'll argue that that's one of those numbers that are like 10 to the minus 79 or something. The percentage of the spacecraft's energy that will be realized in that laser beam will be so tiny that it can't possibly have an effect that you could measure. It has an effect. Everything has an effect. Every tiny little piece of dust that might fall on my head does, in part, okay, an acceleration. But You can't measure it. But he thinks theoretically it doesn't exist. So if I turn the circumstance around, like I said, and made this a gigawatt laser and shot it out the side of the ship, he thinks that wouldn't turn the ship. So if I had a gigawatt laser right here and I pointed it, like say, in some angle to change the direction of the ship, he doesn't think that if I shot a gigawatt laser this way, I wouldn't change the ship to moving this way. He doesn't think that happens. So that's another one of my predictions, asshole. I predict you're wrong about that. That if you put a gigawatt laser on a spacecraft, you can use it as a thruster. I mean, somewhere you're going to have to get gigawatts worth of electricity, which is going to be the tricky part.
And what we say is, oh gosh, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 going in the direction, and now we had 10, and now we've got 9. We've lost momentum in the direction.
So he's using a 9-to-1 ratio, right? When the ratio is trillions of times more disproportionate. The amount of equivalent mass you moved, momentum, you shot out the hole, is so minuscule that you can't measure it, it's so small. But it did happen. You did change the momentum of the ship.
And that's how it works. That's how Mendham's system breaks conservation of momentum.
So how did he prove it? How did he prove that shooting laser light out this side of the ship doesn't change the momentum of the ship? How did he prove that doesn't happen? How did he prove that a gigawatt laser on a spacecraft couldn't be used as a thruster? Where did he prove that?
So it's not even a technical term. It's quite clear that he thinks it means number. The number doesn't disappear. Yeah.
No, it's quite clear, as I've drawn it over and over again, that the exchanges happen, and the exchanges don't violate conservation. And only through these exchanges can any event happen. So there's no event that avoids these exchanges. That is, this red thing doesn't just turn in this direction. There's a black thing that was going this way. The black thing, okay, went this way now, and the red thing goes this way now. They exchange direction. Completely conservational in terms of vectors of momentum. No loss, no degrade, no ruining, no any of that bullshit. That's the mechanism I say every single event in the universe, anything called energetic, is created by. So explain how I violate conservation laws.
Another example of not understanding technical terms.
No, you're the one who obviously doesn't understand how to be fair. You can't pay attention. You're biased, and you're obnoxious. You're arrogant, pious, and stupid.
And yet feeling totally at ease with using them and name-calling other theorists, you know, within his limited understanding.
Well, again, it's clear whose understanding is limited. You think lasers are shot out of spaceships for free. That there is no, it doesn't require a change in the momentum of the ship. He thinks you can shoot as much laser light out of a ship as you want to, and it will never affect how fast the ship goes. So I could just knock the top off of this thing, have a nuclear laser, shoot it out the front of the spaceship, and he would say the spaceship continues to go exactly the same speed. He's the one who's the ignoramus, who doesn't understand the basic concepts.
So, Mendham has ceded, finally, in the end, right? He's been crying about this forever, about there's no two momentums, right? But finally I got him to concede that, look, in the space...
No, he didn't get me to concede anything, so that's a lie. I didn't concede anything but that I can't prove you're stupid as fuck to believe this rubbish. That's all. I conceded nothing. That's just a lie.
Spaceship you'll grant that I could turn my laser to point at a direction. And that laser light going the speed of light, and the spaceship going less than the speed of light, I could decide on this angle and make sure it went through.
Right, and then you're going a longer path. So again, I didn't concede anything. That's a longer path. If you take the diagonal, it's a longer path. That means you won't get out the spaceship in the same amount of time. So you're still violating the time equation then. You can't say the outside observer couldn't see the light go out the spaceship in the allotted amount of time that the speed of light is supposed to be. He wouldn't see that. He would see it take more time.
The window, the hole. Okay? Now,
again, you can't get to the future for free. The future's farther away. So you can keep pretending it's not, but it is.
what we didn't discuss after that is that this piece of light coming out of the spaceship at an angle, from this reference frame, we could say it has a component in my direction of the spaceship, a component perpendicular, and it has its own.
So he's now giving a photon two momentums, which, like I said before, a photon can only move in one dimension, in one direction, and that's it. They can't have any combined momentum. So it's just, there's no way to make that make any sense ever. It never will make any sense. You can't do that. It's not a baseball. The diagonal would have to be a faster, a combined speed would have to be faster than either one of these speeds. Therefore, it can't do it if it's a photon. It can do it if it's a baseball. It can't do it if it's a photon.
Its own vector momentum in the direction of its travel.
Right, and then it won't be traveling the speed of light to do that.
So this notion of two momentums is given. There's always two momentums, three momentums spatially, that you can get components of.
Yeah, no, you can't for a photon. It's a one-dimensional object. It only travels in one dimension, and that's it. So again, I concede nothing. There's no way I've ever accepted that notion, ever.
Right. There's no magic there, and there's nothing to get.
There is magic there, in the sense that you keep ignoring the fact that this can't be the speed of light, this can't be the speed of light, and this can't be the speed of light. One of those has to be wrong.
Get upset about it. Now, these truths all come from these formulas, yeah?
No, they come from the thought experiments done by people and thinking about what would happen. I'm sure the formulas are a byproduct of thought experiments. The formulas didn't just fall into their head like, oh, I just thought of the formula. No, they figured the formula out by going with what's the cause, what's the effect, and how can I formalize the circumstances of the variables before and then the circumstance of the variables after. What changed, how did it change, and how do I formalize that? That's where the formulas came from. Dumbass. Let's move ahead.
Orthodox picture of science.
So again, he's back to this again. Again, this is just a totally not real circumstance. This V doesn't exist in any real circumstance ever. It's not a real velocity. He's saying because two things pass each other, all of a sudden I can change their speeds. Again, if I take this pen and I throw it all by itself, it'll go a certain speed. He's saying if I throw another pen in the opposite direction and they don't hit each other, that somehow this pen slowed down and the other pen slowed down, so that their combined speed wouldn't violate the speed of light. I say, absolute bullshit.
We start off, point one of the theory is you can't aim them well enough. Right? And this is, and everything that subsequently follows in the two slates and in...
We're way past aiming them, right? So that argument was made like 5 years ago, and yes, it's clear photons are difficult, okay, to aim. I don't think it's theoretically impossible, but yes, difficult. So that's not part of the argument now. So I don't even know why he's bringing that up.
A plethora of other scientific experiments all support the idea.
Okay, so he says a plethora of other scientific experiments, all as shabbily described and documented as the slit experiments. So just an amazing statement. So instead of admitting it's shabby evidence, it's incredibly weak evidence, that it's very bad for the evidence that water waves don't match in the single slit and water waves don't match in the multi-slit. That's very bad evidence. Instead of just admitting that, saying, yes, okay, we should have better evidence before we claim this is nail in the coffin. This isn't anything like nail in the coffin evidence. Instead of just admitting, yes, I agree, it's nothing like nail in the coffin evidence. Instead of just admitting a simple truth, he'll do this insane rationalizations justifying this mush. Hey, oh, look at all our evidence. Look at that evidence, look at that one. Look at that great piece of evidence there. I mean, haven't you seen a little slashy line evidence? I mean, that's huge evidence. Huge. Fuck. Cunt.
Here, you can't aim. So I think he's given up on this notion, but you never know.
Yeah, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I gave up on that notion. You lunatic. I mean, like I said, I still haven't given up on the notion. I'm saying, yeah, well, this would really help if we figure out how to do this single photon thing, okay, in some kind of reliable way. Yeah, maybe.
Very apt at forgetting where he's at in his own...
Yeah, bullshit. You're obviously just, again, misparaphrasing the argument, mischaracterizing what's been said, what videos have been made, all of the recent videos on the two-slit experiment. Why don't you play one of those, you fucking lying sack of shit? And instead, you're what? You're going to drag up something I said 5 years ago. Quote, mining weaselly behavior. Bravo again.
Physics development, and you never know, we might propose a defence to this again. Right? So the answer is, if that's the argument you want to make to orthodox science, we just say, whatever, go have at it. Yeah?
Oh, yeah, whatever. No, I've already made the argument. Your math doesn't work. I've pointed out how the pattern isn't correct. And you're just ignoring those arguments. I point out how it doesn't match in water waves. You're ignoring it. Okay, you keep arguing it's strong evidence, and this is the look of what strong evidence looks like. This absolute shit is his strong fucking evidence. Amazing.
Real velocity, because what we're talking about is a number.
So again, not real. Yes, that's right. It's not real. It doesn't matter. This is all fake nonsense, and what you erased, which is the v1 times v2 divided by the speed of light squared, is a contrived piece of rubbish merely to keep the number from going over a maximum. Period.
But that we measure, okay? And in a sense, it's kind of an emergent number.
So again, this is supposed to be his decisive evidence. Decisive, definitively wrong. This is somehow real evidence of something. There's no real evidence in any of this mush. This is just bullshit. Look at all the scribbles.
Rate of change is what is acceleration. Yeah? So that he would be saying, he's trying to talk about the second derivative of this graph. And that's just nonsense. Yeah?
No. Well, again, people can judge for themselves that the idea of creating a stop is the same thing as and creating an infinity. So the idea is you make something infinitely massive. Okay, that's what that little equation did. This is basically creating an infinity. That makes it not possible for this number to go too high. This one goes infinite, in the sense that it's going infinite in the opposite direction. So make one of those variables bigger, and you'll always make it smaller.
He hasn't a clue. He knows what to be lenient, we can understand that what he's talking about is that this function,
yeah, it's just the gravity well turned upside down. Yes, that's right.
Just dissipate into the sea of quantum. And it isn't enough to say that just because there is this there are these external collisions.
There's no external.
Word on that?
No external collisions. No external collisions. Collisions obviously have to happen inside of atoms. They have to happen where photons actually hit electrons or quanta actually hits something, material. An atom isn't a ball. It isn't solid. Can't just hit the outside and go away.
That's only true for those ideas. If Mendel wants to have a new idea where it's not as straightforward as that, because there is no certain...
Well, I've obviously pointed out how it has nothing to do with bouncing off of round things. So, I mean, I've obviously pointed out how it goes into things, and the exchange takes place inside protons and electrons. I've pointed that out explicitly, and that all acceleration is something absorbed. You have to absorb acceleration. You consume it for a period of time. You consume something's force identity for a period of time. And that makes you move for that period of time. And the longer you hold the energy, the longer it will move you.
This to be modelled in his idea, that somehow these things permeate all the way through, and the forces is acting at different points, sometimes at the surface, sometimes deeper, sometimes polarized, different colors or whatever. Yeah.
All right, it's whatever. Yeah, it's not that complicated, right? Two polarizations leading to a consistent but constantly vibrating pressure. Okay. Consistent within parameters. It doesn't go from 0 to a billion. It just subtly changes from a billion plus 1, a billion minus 1. So there's shudder because of this pressure, slight variations in this pressure. But that's the basic mechanism holding the electrons and the protons together. Yes.
Now, he has to have a very good reason for why this thing holds together. Because
I don't have to have a very good reason. Just like they don't explain how neutrinos are held to protons. They don't explain any of the subatomic character. So you can say they have a model. Go show me the page that explains how it's all bound together in some way. Show me the coherent, definitive diagram that they're willing to bet their kid's life on. Because it doesn't exist. So again, I don't have to do that. I just have to account for the energy in and the energy out. I don't have to account for the internal mechanism of an electron. That's nonsense. They don't do it, I don't have to do it. You fucking are obviously just applying a double fucking standard. They don't have any explanation. They don't even explain how a magnet works. They don't explain their nuclear forces, and they certainly don't explain gravity with any kind of rational mechanism. You just say bent space. Bent space is supposed to, what, you don't have to explain how bent space does it? So again, your hypocrisy is so fucking overt.
Without a good reason, all these so-called contained quanta will statistically just dissipate into the sea.
No, they won't. So again, they'll do this. Once you have them compressed, they'll stay compressed. So that I think is obvious, right? Once I have them in this kind of condition, they have no way of getting out of this condition unless you somehow break this field energy, this pressure. So until this pressure goes away, they'll never expand. So that argument can certainly be made. So if you create them and put them in this pressure field, they won't just fall apart. So this is a lie. There has no evidence that that would happen. It's incredible. This pressure is the opposite of a nuclear bomb worth of pressure. This is an insane amount of pressure at the core of the universe. Every electron is in a field of intense pressure.
Quanta. And it isn't enough to say that just because there is this there are these external collisions, statistically, without a theory to make it remain a body, they will dissipate. Yeah?
So again, no reasoning will be provided for how they will do that if the pressure of the external circumstance is many times stronger than the amount of pressure on the inside. So if they're getting hit by 10 arrows going this way, and there's only one arrow defeating it, clearly the outside pressure is going to force that arrow to keep going back and forth. It won't be able to go very far in either direction. So if this pressure is 10 times greater than the pressure in here, then these arrows will just keep bouncing back and forth. No matter which way they're going, they're just going to keep getting rebounded in the opposite direction. The opposite pressure will force them back in again. They'll just keep going back and forth. So you're wrong on theory. And again, I haven't committed to any description of the internal mechanism of an electron, because I would be, in all honesty, just making it up. And I don't see any point. I don't need to account for the internal workings of electrons. I'm fully allowed to give them properties just like your conventional physics does. Your conventional physics gives things properties. It doesn't explain how they work. You haven't explained how your electric field works. You haven't explained how your magnetic field works. And you haven't explained how bent space works. So you have no right to tell me that I have to account for the internal glue holding an electron together. That is just absolute duplicity on your part.
Because I could put a ring round here and say, this is suddenly a body, and all these others are going to keep them there somehow. That's not...
So again, somehow, the point has already been argued over and over again. Pressure, incredibly high pressure. The amount of quanta in the universe can be illustrated by the opposite effect, which is something like a nuclear bomb. That's the kind of pressure you're seeing when it's reversed. You can't see it until there's an imbalance in the field somewhere. And when those imbalances show up, you certainly are aware of the pressure. The opposite effect, pressure, you can see it and you can realize, oh yeah, there's a lot of energy tied up in those electrons. They were under an awful lot of pressure.
Where these random particles work. Yeah? You can get statistical clumps with random bodies moving like this.
So again, never have I argued that the electrons are being created in the universe right now by the pressure, that they're just like randomly clumping together. I've made the argument that there was some other process that likely created electrons. So he just keeps lying about the position. He keeps lying about the fact that this has already been argued and that I have no obligation to go into details that we have no possibility of having much hope of accurately explaining.